Children are dying every day from hunger and sickness. Innocent children, just like this one. These children are facing death right now, but with your support and just 50 cents a day, we can save them. Please go online or call this number and join the U.S. Fund for UNICEF for only $15 a month. It's just 50 cents a day, and you'll deliver emergency medical care, vaccines, and life-saving nutrition to the children who could die without it. It's just 50 cents a day, but it'll mean the difference between life and death for a child waiting for help right now.
Oh shit. La 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 la, wait till I get my money right.
Reach out to that child so they never have to look into the face of death again. Go online or pick up the phone now.
Malcolm Caldwell was a Marxist activist from Scotland during the 1970s. Throughout his early years in university, he, like many polychromatic-haired white girls today, became radicalized into communist and post-colonial ideas. This was during his time studying at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He would later set up the Journal of Contemporary Asia, an academic journal, which at face value was meant to study the continent from a scholarly, evidence-based perspective. But Caldwell was more interested in using and abusing his academic status to fight for the oppressed and the marginalized. By, you guessed it, supporting some of the most oppressive regimes on the planet, and silencing those who have been marginalized by those said oppressive regimes. Kind of like another prominent voice of the voiceless I could think of.
Tibet was literally a fucking feudal slave mandate autonomous zone.
China did them a favor.
Caldwell's favorite regime to stand for was the communist Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, ruled by Pol Pot during the mid to late 1970s, a regime which at the time was in the process of sadistically murdering a fifth to a quarter of its own population. In the aim of producing a stateless, classless communist utopia, Pol Pot created a totalitarian state in which everyone but his goons were grinded into crushing poverty, while Pol Pot enjoyed imported delicacies, a legion of servants, and a custom limousine. To be fair to Pol Pot though, he did prefer Mercedes-Benz. Hasan's Porsche was a little bit too extravagant for him.
La 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 la, wait till I get my money.
Hasan also loves his $1,300 Cartier glasses. Well, it turned out that merely wearing any pair of glasses would land you in the killing fields of Cambodia, as glasses were associated with educated people, and educated people were seen as being privileged over the uneducated people. That's what the world needs, more uneducated people, as if YouTube's commentary community isn't oversaturated as it is. To be fair, by the end of this video, some of you might entertain the notion of sending some academics into forced labor camps. Malcolm Caldwell had used his position as a Marxist academic to downplay the mass murder spree in Cambodia, even when the evidence was piling up. That evidence oftentimes coming in the form of a mountain of skulls. Caldwell loved Pol Pot so much that he eventually traveled Cambodia to prove that the reports of genocide were nothing but bogus Western capitalist propaganda. Caldwell was given a highly restricted tour by regime officials. According to another journalist by the name of Elizabeth Becker who traveled with him, Caldwell was exuberant throughout the trip, praising the regime for its path to creating a communist utopia, while behind the scenes, mothers watched their infants' heads being crushed against tree trunks. On his final day of the trip, Caldwell got to meet his hero Pol Pot in person. That same evening, in the same room he met Pol Pot, Elizabeth Becker found his corpse. Okay, framing over. As my subscribers know, I had previously made a trilogy of video essays about Hasan Piker's anti-communist, anti-consumerist, hyper-consumerism persona. And needless to say, Hasan Piker is clearly a fan of the Wizard of Wit.
But if there's one avenue that we have not made a single fucking dent in, it's socialism but rich. That shit is catnip for every broke boy on the planet. I saw it randomly on my YouTube algo. Some guy literally ran every other week. There's another fucking 45-minute YouTube video essay. Hasan is a hypocritical socialist because he's rich. And then they run the route of like all the previous things that I never have implied or anything like that. They'll be like, oh, he came from a rich background. He lied about his background. I never did.
Well, Comrade Hasan, thank you for watching. I have decided to shill for YouTube views by creating another series about you, but this time it will not be about economics but global affairs. I look forward to you strawmanning my arguments and accusing my audience of the cardinal communist sin of being poor.
I buy a lot of expensive things because I have a lot of money. You can't afford expensive things because you don't have a lot of money. Haha, you want these things but you cannot afford them. That means that you're not cool because you're just a poor person.
Well, you're a poor capitalist. You know what I mean? I'd rather be a rich socialist than a broke boy.
Stupid poor people, stupid poor people. I have more money than you. Stupid poor people, stupid poor people. You can't even afford food.
This series will be about global affairs and what some call the anti-imperialism of idiots. See, our defender of the oppressed, Hasan, is a staunch anti-imperialist. And when I say that he's an anti-imperialist, I mean that he actually loves imperialism, so long as the imperialism is done by anti-Western dictatorships.
But like, you feeling bad about the Crimean annexation does not change the reality of the Crimean annexation being a completely justifiable fucking act by the Russian government, okay? So that's it.
Well, Hasan, your hometown of Istanbul used to be Greek and Christian. How about you donate one of your daddy's mansions to some stereotypically lazy Greek guy? He can even turn your pet horse into souvlaki. Now, Hasan's profound geopolitical strategic philosophy can basically be summarized as West equal poo-poo caca pee-pee doo-doo fart, anti-West equal good, fun, ice cream, kitten, unicorn.
If you say America bad, and you just run with that, and if you're a campist in general, right, you're probably going to be on the right side of most arguments, like 98% of the time. Maybe the 2% of the time it's like devastatingly bad, but like 98% is a pretty good track record.
North Korea is anti-Western, and you know that they are the good guys since they imprison people for watching shitty Korean soap operas. Now, many of you have heard of the term useful idiot. Useful idiots are usually people who jump on the bandwagon of some sort of cause without really understanding it, not realizing that they are nothing more than pawns of nefarious forces. What most people don't know is that the term was first widely used during the Cold War to describe people who made apologetic arguments for communist dictatorships. You know, the sort of nincompoop who would open up Mao's little red book and stare at it like it was the first pair of tits he saw.
Yeah.
What is this? Hey, what's going on?
No problem, chat.
Oh, no way!
It's a small one.
And it's the first version.
It's the first. Wait.
Yeah.
Really? Is that a Bible?
No, that's a little red book.
It is basically.
The little red book?
The little red book? It's the red Bible is what it is.
Oh.
Did Mao's little red book contain a centerfold of Amaranth's boobs? Just look at how cute this picture of Mao is playing along with the kids. He probably gifted these children with Labubus right before shooting them. Before the Cold War, many leftist movements were fixated on the concept of quote-unquote workers of the world unite. It was a universal message that blue-collar people from all over the world, from the US to Germany, China to Africa, had to unite in unison against the rich capital owners, such as Hasan's dad. However, in the aftermath of World War II, the forces of capitalist liberal democracies led by the United States on one hand, and authoritarian communist regimes led by the USSR on the other hand, would rekindle their alliance of friendship and they would live in peace and harm. Wait, sorry, fact check. No, just kidding. The two sides would eventually spend most of the remainder of the decade, and not only that decade, but the entire century, orchestrating coups, espionage, invasions, propaganda, and a whole bunch of other really heinous shit. Here is a Soviet propaganda poster of an evil capitalist pig hoarding his money. Instead, he should have been helping the poor like Hasan does by buying jewelry. Here is another piece of communist propaganda featuring a birch tree spanking someone's ass for littering. It isn't really related to the main subject of this video, I just wanted to include it anyway. The Soviet Union placed a great deal of attention to information warfare through the use of propaganda, not only to indoctrinate domestic hikers against littering, but also to promote subversion abroad, oftentimes using the openness and free speech of democracies against themselves. Many of you have heard of the term Tanky. It is oftentimes used loosely to refer to anybody who supports anti-Western dictatorships, but the actual meaning is more specific. The term dates back to the Hungarian Revolution of 1956 and the Prague Uprising of 1968, in which mass protests for self-determination and human rights in Eastern Europe were crushed with Soviet tanks. Tankies in this case were British communists who stood up for the downtrodden by supporting Soviet tanks rolling over the downtrodden. The term quickly morphed into a description for any Western communist who enjoyed the comforts of democracy and consumer culture while making sure that people living under oppressive regimes never got to enjoy the civil liberties and prosperity that they experienced. Here is a picture of Hasan reading, pretending to read, a book by Vladimir Lenin while wearing a 3K white gold ring. I'm assuming that the African gold miner who dug underground to find the metal for this ring has already died from lung cancer, but he died knowing that his sacrifice led to Hasan getting a lot of likes on Instagram. From Stalin to Pol Pot and Mao, Tankies at the time and to this day continue to defend some of the most murderous regimes of the 20th century.
I mean, one of the greatest things that Mao Zedong did, right, was he was able to go to towns that were previously dominated by the KMT in the Civil War and literally convince the fucking peasant class and convince the workers that KMT was a representation of the old way of doing business, where they would relegate power back to the landed gentry, and that the new way of doing business would be communism, giving people the power. And they very clearly chose communism. Like, that's... It's not like they all became ideologically invested. Okay, they didn't become ideologically invested. They didn't read a book. They were just like, okay, this is actually a far better alternative.
Yeah, they chose communism when they had a barrel of a gun pointed at their heads. Mao's forces went into villages and first killed the landlords, like Hasan's mom. Then they convinced the peasants to work in convinced labor camps, voluntary labor camps, in which 3 million villagers perished. But don't worry though, I'm sure Mao allowed the peasants to own $1,000 Hawaiian t-shirts. Unfortunately, the Chinese poors never got to enjoy a vacation on the tropical islands shown on the fucking shirt. Tankies had gained traction, latching on like parasites to otherwise valid movements, namely the Vietnam War protests in the United States and decolonial protests in Europe. This would result in post-colonial theorists emerging in the same universities where the protests were being held. Granted, this opposition to colonialism and imperialism was usually relegated to attacking Europe, the United States, and their allies.
To you, two principles that you should keep with you, coming from a person who's Turkish, okay? When you look at a situation in the Middle East, you look at what the local government is and who the Western forces are. Never align with the Western forces. That's a principle that you could take home with you. If you want to actually be moral, or if you want to be smart about the way you analyze other countries, that's one basic principle that you can take home with you. All of a sudden, magically, you are above on your foreign policy analysis. You're going to be better off than 90% of people that look at the situation.
Hasan, I don't know if you know this, but you're Turkish. When it comes to genocide, you might want to sit this one out, buddy. Your first Nepo job was at a company named after a group of people who loved ethnic cleansing. Maybe the YouTube algo will help my pissant 10K channel if I rename it to the Hitler Youth. This fixation over colonialism amounted to an inverted version of Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism is the idea in which everything revolves around Europe and its offshoots, but instead of these nations being responsible for all of humanity's accomplishments, Europe and its offshoots are now responsible for all the atrocities from pillaging Africa to British cuisine. See, before pasty white boys started colonizing the world, all the brown people were just prancing around the flower fields in peace and harmony. Here is a depiction of an Aztec priest ripping the heart of a human sacrifice from the lands the Aztecs conquered. This guy bleeding out is in excruciating pain, but he can take solace in the fact that the guy who killed him had a lot of melanin. This leads us to the concept of Third Worldism. We have all heard of the term Third World in relation to countries in Africa, parts of Latin America, and Asia, which are poorer than First World countries of the West, Northeast Asia, and other parts of the world that are, well, wealthy. Many of you also remember the First World Problems meme, referring to people crying over trivial nonsense, such as an e-thought crying that her Instagram account was locked.
Instagram, please get back to me about why my account is deleted. Never posted anything on there that showed nipples, nudity, photography, nothing. I never did any of that. I don't even use DMs or talk to people on there. I'm seriously having a panic attack. Can someone please respond to me and get back to me about why my account was deleted?
A young woman who has run out of her vapid external validation medication. Nurse, get the compliments dialysis. So we all have a sense of what the Third World is, and even the First World, but what is the Second World? Well, hypothetical question asker, the Second World referred to the communist world led by the Soviet Union and or China. Third World countries set up the non-aligned movement. Most of these countries were ones who threw off the yoke of European colonialism and did not want to be subservient to either the First or the Second Worlds. Core, informal leaders of this movement were Nehru of India, Nasser of Egypt, and Tito of Yugoslavia, the latter of which was a communist who was nonetheless anti-Soviet. Another testament to how the simplistic camps are far more complicated than the names would suggest. In practice, most countries lean towards one side or the other. On top of that, the notion of a united Third World really didn't exist in practice. A llama shepherd in Bolivia, a fisherman in Zambia, and a rice farmer in Nepal don't have much in common other than honest work with their own hands and shitting into a septic tank. The idea of a united Third World meant little to actual Third World people, but it was used by Soviet propaganda. Communist leaders living in luxury pretended to be the voice of the global South. Kind of like another person I can name.
In order to build a robust working class movement, you need to actually be in front of the working class.
You know all of that money which Hasan spends on Gucci Funko Pops? Well, that could have been spent on mosquito nets in Africa. If these children get malaria, it will be their fault. In reality, the socialist Soviet Union was imperialistic. It was a colonial force. It was, after all, the largest country in the world, and its successor state, Russia, still is today. How did they get so big? Did they just give people free vodka, and they were too drunk to put up a resistance? While gaining very little traction in the Third World, Third Worldism did gain traction in Western universities and activist-based departments around the same time that the Vietnam War protests were going on. University was probably the institution where Hasan picked up these beliefs. while he was undergoing bro-tip hazing rituals, shoving beer bottles up his ass or up someone else's ass.
Oh hey, didn't see you there. I'm Hasan Piker and this is Bro Tip. This week's Bro Tip is about bringing out the alpha male in you. Here's why the 5-second rule works. Because when you start thinking for longer than 5 seconds, you're immediately not thinking with your dick and also thinking with this pesky thing up here that we like to call our brains.
Third Worldism and anti-Western sentiment went out of fashion as a political fad by the mid-1970s. But in the past few years, it has re-emerged in the spotlight. One of the best writers on the subject is the Moroccan-American scholar Zineb Rabua. In her essay, The Third Worldist Logic, she states, "A third worldist conviction is that the West is the permanent oppressor, and that any movement arrayed against Western power is inherently righteous. This is why Western activists with no connection to the region chant in the vocabulary of decolonial struggle rather than Islamic jurisprudence or Marxist economics. They are challenging a worldview born in Paris, Algiers, and Havana, refined in Western universities, and now applied indiscriminately to conflicts framed as West versus non-West." Zineb points out that one of the core foundations of Third Worldism is blaming successful nations for the failures of poor nations. While there are legit grievances many developing countries have when it comes to their past colonialization, keep in mind that there are many colonized countries that have become very successful, such as South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Ireland, and Costa Rica. Meanwhile, many countries which face minimal or no formal colonization, such as Ethiopia and Iran, are borderline failed states. If anything, countries which were once poor and became successful, such as Taiwan or the Gulf states, are viewed as traitors for the crime of not staying, well, she wouldn't put it this way, but I will, shitholes.
I think that we are a parasitic force on the planet. If I'm being very critical, America has always been a dominant force around the planet.
Third Worldism provides an easy scapegoat to simplify and put blame on the successful for the fuck-ups and the failures, and in doing so, makes apologetic excuses for tin-pot dictatorships, corrupt politicians, mafia states, and terrorist groups, painting these shit-stains as righteous actors fighting against the evils of the global north. All the while, they rob, oppress, and murder their own people.
Okay, this is a stupid question. Okay, you can preface it with that. Does he know what One Piece is?
One Piece, like, is that an organization?
No, One Piece is an anime.
Oh, اوكي. اول شيء بقول لك انه ممكن هذا السؤال يكون شوي اهبل، بس بسالك تعرف شو هو ون بيس؟ عمرك سمعت بون بيس؟
اكيد يعني منذ الطفوله وانا اشاهد ون بيس. لوفي.
Is it Luffy?
Yeah, he said he's been watching it since he was a kid.
No way!
Yeah.
That's sick. Yes, that's fire. That's so fire. Oh my god. Dude, we think the Houthis Ansar Allah is doing what Luffy would do. You should tell him that.
بقول لك حسن انه
Zineb also points out that after the excesses of, dare I say, quote-unquote, woke identity politics around race and gender became exhausted, many activist movements have rebranded the simplistic mantra of the oppressor versus the oppressed from being about domestic, aforementioned racial and gender issues into global issues between an evil oppressor developed world, which is just, well, evil, and a good, wholesome, developing world. All of this casts the original woke activism of the 2010s, and yes, I'm using the word woke in quotation marks, into the dustbin of history.
I don't give a fuck what black people care about.
And this is unsurprising, that they would abandon issues like women's rights, gay rights, workers' rights, religious freedom, and racial justice, given that many of these governments and terrorist groups in the developing world, which Tankies, Campism, and Third Worldist support, have horrendous human rights records.
Apple removes Chinese gay dating apps on government order? Okay, but that's Apple.
In China, producing homoerotic anime known as boys love can get you arrested. But I guess that's Apple's fault as well. Hey Hasan, next time you go on a Chinese propaganda trip, make sure to see what happens when you spank twinks in public. At the end of the day, this ideology is not about fighting against injustice, since it involves kissing the ass of regimes which engage in injustice. What it is actually about is envy and resentment towards Western capitalist, open, pluralistic, liberal democracies. Funny enough, the only parts of the global south or third world where third worldism has any relevance in are parts of the developing world which are the most culturally similar to the West, such as Latin America and South Africa. This sort of rhetoric is not popular among the poor rural farmers or factory workers, but rather comes from privileged political class members who studied at Western universities and are heavily influenced by the Western use of, well, anti-Western ideas, to blame the wealthy countries for the corruption in their own institutions, of their own political classes of which they are a part of. Apartheid in South Africa is responsible for a lot of the problems that still exist in the country today, but white nationalists didn't force the former head of state to allegedly grape a woman who tested positive for HIV and then apparently wash off his AIDS with a shower. Under this worldview, equity is the natural state, and since there are some societies which are more successful than others, and because these cognitive invalids believe in a fixed pie fallacy in which wealth exists in a fixed finite amount, they view rich countries as leeches off of poor countries, and that all of their success is purely the result of exploitation.
I think that we are a parasitic force on the planet.
Here is a meme I've seen posted all the time on the brainrot universe of Twitter/X.com. Funny enough, it has been posted by both people on the far right and far left. Far right accounts have posted it to describe how third world people are supposedly dirt, spreading their filth to good wholesome mayo-consuming countries. Meanwhile, far left ideologues have posted this meme claiming that the only reason why developed countries are so rich is because they stole resources from the poor countries. Neither of these explanations stand up to scrutiny though. Russia is located in Europe, and it is mostly white, yet it ranks lower by numerous metrics including life satisfaction than many countries you'd consider to be part of the developing world such as Costa Rica and Panama. Who needs a nuclear arsenal when you have sloths?
Here we are, seeing a baby sloth crossing the road.
Likewise, plenty of aforementioned colonized countries have achieved remarkable success. South Korea is richer per capita than its colonial oppressor Japan. Ireland is richer than its former colonial master Britain.
Give up the charms, Lucky.
And of course, I have to mention Turkey's exploitative and oftentimes parasitic history during the days of the Ottoman Empire. Countries once under the Turkish yoke such as Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary all have higher standards of living and more political freedom than their imperial oppressor, Turkey. Well, back then it was the Ottoman Empire, but Turkey's a successor state. You get what I'm saying. Yes, but in spite of all of this, Hasan chooses solidarity with Turkey over the evil United States, even though he still prefers to live in the United States and refuses to move back to Turkey.
The thing I was going to say is Crimea does not belong to Russia. Crimea does not belong to Ukraine. Crimea belongs to the Turks.
Speaking of Turkey, Hasan can't even safely go back to his country of origin because of the most mild criticism he has given of the Turkish government, and his acknowledgement of the Armenian genocide.
Hey, I mean no disrespect, but if you hate America so much, why don't you just move back to Turkey? Easy answer. I f*** your mom every night. Why don't I move back to Turkey? Because your mom is here. Yeah, and I have sex with your mom. Every night, actually, as a matter of fact. So, don't feel like leaving anytime soon. She doesn't want to come to Turkey, your mom. Sorry. I'm gonna keep your mom. And I'm gonna keep living here. Fucking your mom every night. No disrespect, though.
When I show women my money, they want to have sex with me, and they always have orgasms because my penis is so big.
Now, does the fact that the US allows Hasan to live a very comfortable and free lifestyle in comparison to Turkey cause him to gain any appreciation for the country he lives in? No, of course not, because Hasan is a parasite, a tapeworm feeding off of America's shit-smeared intestinal tract. In my previous series on Hasan, I claimed that Hasan thinks that he's Che Guevara, when in reality he's the Che Guevara t-shirt. Like Hasan, Che was a privileged quasi-white guy who claimed to be the voice of the Third World. However, Che would be killed in Bolivia, with the help of poor indigenous peasants, informing the Bolivian military of his whereabouts. Today, Che is mostly well known for having his pretty face plastered on t-shirts for dumb teenagers in the quote-unquote Imperial Corps to LARP as revolutionaries. Bordering Bolivia is the nation of Peru, a country which suffered through a brutal Marxist insurrection by a group known as the Shining Path. The Shining Path fought for the rights of the poor indigenous farmers and workers through the power of assassinating union leaders, democratic leftist politicians, and ordinary indigenous farm workers. These Marxist revolutionaries would steal the surplus crops from farmers, preventing them from not only profiting, but also from feeding themselves. Most of the crops were sent to the quote-unquote liberation fighters, who in turn liberated the peasants from their digestive systems. And if the peasants were not liberated from their lives through the power of starvation, the Shining Path would liberate them through the power of executions. The Shining Path's doctrine considered human rights to be quote-unquote bourgeoisie and a tool of the evil Western capitalist imperialistic powers. The leader Guzman even claimed that human rights were an affront to his main goal, which was a quote, dictatorship of the proletariat. Kind of like another dipshit I could name.
One of the first speakers, I forget your name, had some interesting words to say, that there's always going to be power. I say we put the power back in the hands of the many, rather than the power in the hands of the few. If a dictatorship is inevitable, I'd rather have it be a dictatorship of the proletariat than one that is designed around the needs of the bourgeois class.
While the Peruvian government at the time was far from angelic, the atrocities committed by the Shining Path were so widespread that indigenous peasants formed their own militia groups allied with the Peruvian military. This was met with countless massacres orchestrated by the Shining Path, but the combination of the government and the peasants, the working class of the Global South, eventually crushed the Marxist rebels. And to this day, they are a shell of their former selves. After the conflict had ended, for the most part, Peru had a rapid decline in political violence, increased standards of living, and today is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, employing over 1 million citizens who make a living showing foreigners their country's remarkable natural and cultural heritage. While Peru was trying to deal with its past violence, pampered Marxist university students continued to revere the Shining Path, such as one group of Harvard students who formed the band Rage Against the Machine. One of their songs, Bomb Track, praises the Shining Path for their fight against the landowners. I think you know where this is going. Tom Morello, the lead guitarist, who to his credit is a really great guitarist, lives in a gated community in the Hollywood Hills. The drummer, Brad Wilk, owns a multi-million-dollar set of mansions. The frontman, Zach De La Roche, lives in a $3.68 mansion, similar to that of the other destroyer of property owners, Hasan Piker.
Yeah, kill them. Kill those fuckers and murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
These beliefs did not resonate in the long run among people of the Global South, but rather pampered Western students in the quote-unquote imperial core. But you know what has pushed millions of people out of poverty, albeit very imperfectly? Capitalism. Just look at all of these graphs.
We stopped the world, and this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
Now don't get me wrong, capitalism has plenty of flaws. I mentioned it in my video, Hasan Piker and the Labubu billionaire war. It has led to mass inequality, monopoly mergers, corporate welfare, and most of all, Hasan Piker making millions of dollars sitting on his ass while watching other people's content on Twitch. But nonetheless, it has also pulled millions upon millions of people out of poverty. The Global South will continue to improve while ticks like Hasan continue living in the quote-unquote imperial core, advocating for failed belief systems which lead to these people being brutalized and subjugated. But hey, dismiss every argument I made in this video. After all, my audience and I are just too poor to understand Marxist-Leninism, Maoism, and Third Worldism. After all, we only make $35,000 a year on average.
Every person making $35,000 a year, when they hear someone go, oh, this guy's a rich socialist, isn't that hypocritical? That is catnip, dude.
Maybe you viewers can help me make more than $35,000 a year by subscribing and watching my other videos. That way I can make more money and fight alongside my comrade Hasan Piker to liberate the Global South. I need you to help me acquire this anti-capitalist capital. I just can't fight against the imperial core without my Gucci bag.